Before we start, Maureen, looks like somebody in attendance has their hand up. George, do you have a question? Nope. Okay.
Okay.
Never mind, Maureen.
So welcome everyone to this virtual community meeting to discuss NPA 2024-0019.02. If you haven't done so already, please let us know who is here by typing your name in the chat. And if you're with an organization, if you can include that as well. Please mute your microphone if you're joining by phone, and also if you can turn off your video to help save bandwidth. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the publicinput.com/neighborhood plan amendment cases website. This is the same website where if you logged in through the web, it'll be posted to the same website. If you do not want your image viewed publicly, please turn off your camera. As you know, this is in the Central Austin Combined Neighborhood Planning Area, the West University part of the plan. Mark Walters will be the meeting facilitator tonight. My name is Maureen Meredith. I am the Plan Amendment Case Manager. Jonathan Tomko is the Zoning Case Manager, and this is our contact information. Tonight I'll go over basic case information, guidelines for group discussion, how to participate in this process. Why is there a plan amendment application? What is a future land use map, also called the FLUM? After my presentation, Michael Whalen, the applicant's agent, will do a presentation. Then we will open the meeting to the Q&A. So the property addresses are 715, 725, 800, 801, 804, 806, 808, 901, 905, 907 West 34th Street, 3301, 3404, 3406 West Avenue, and 3316 Grandview Street, these are the addresses for the plan amendment application. So again, the plan amendment case number is NPA 2024-0019.02. Project name is 34th and West FLUM Amendment. The request is to change the future land use map from single family and mixed use office to mixed use. The zoning case has the same addresses as the plan amendment, with the addition of a portion of 3317 North Lamar Boulevard is included in the zoning case, which is not in the plan amendment case because that part of the property already has the mixed use land use. There are 4 zoning cases associated with the plan amendment case: C14 2025 0006, C14 2025 0007, C14 2025 0008, and C14 2025 0009. So the proposed zoning change is to go from LO E Todd DB90, let me just read it out, Limited Office District, Equitable Transit Oriented Development Combining District, Density Bonus Equitable Transit Oriented Development Combining District Neighborhood Plan, and General Commercial Services District, Conditional Overlay Combining District, Equitable Transit Oriented Development Combining District, Density Bonus Equitable Transit Oriented Development Combining District Neighborhood Plan, and Limited Office District, Conditional Overlay Combining District, Equitable Transit Oriented Development Combining District, Density Bonus Equitable Transit Oriented Development Combining District Neighborhood Plan. 2. General Commercial Services District, Vertical Mixed Use Building Combining District, Density Bonus 90 Combining District, Equitable Transit Oriented Development Combining District, Density Bonus Equitable Transit Oriented Development Combining District Neighborhood Plan. So the property owner applicant is West 34th Street Neighborhood Improvement Company, LLC. The agent is Michael Whalen from Armbruster & Brown. So guidelines for group discussion: please filter type your questions into the chat at any time during the meeting and after our presentations. If you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand symbol in the menu bar. Telephone participants will be able to speak during the Q&A session of the meeting, and we will call out the last 4 digits of your phone number. Attendees will be muted upon arrival and through the staff and applicant presentations. Then we will open the floor to questions in the chat and by attendees raising their hand. We ask that you be respectful to each other during the meeting discussion, and if there are any repeated interruptions during the discussion, it will result in participants being muted or removed from the meeting. So how to participate in the process. As I mentioned, the meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the public input website. You can email or call me or Jonathan with any questions or comments that you have. If you have any written comments, they'll be included in the staff case reports that go before Planning Commission and City Council. When the cases are scheduled for Planning Commission and City Council, you will get a notice in the mail if you live within 500 feet. It'll have instructions on how to participate in the public hearings. So why is there a plan amendment application? Neighborhood plans are adopted by City Council as amendments to the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan, and the City Charter requires zoning changes to be consistent with the Comprehensive Plan. Most neighborhood plan amendments are changes to a future land use map, also called the FLUM, and most plan amendment applications have an associated zoning application. This map shows the areas that have City Council approved neighborhood plans. Those are shown in blue. All of these planning areas have a plan document that has the vision and goals of the planning area, and most of which also have a future land use map where these colors represent broad land uses. For example, for this particular property, the existing land use is single family, which is shown in yellow, and mixed use office, which is kind of the maroonish brownish color, and the proposed is mixed use, which is the brown color. So this is the aerial photo that shows the future land use map overlaid on the properties. So I'm going to walk through each one of the zoning maps. So this is the 0006 property, 0007 property, 0008 property, and 0009 property. Is there a question?
No licensure of individuals involved, and there's no transparency.
This map shows the the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan Growth Concept Map. These colors represent regional centers, town centers, neighborhood centers, and activity corridors. So this is a zoomed in part of the map where it shows the properties just north of the downtown regional center, and it is kind of surrounded by some activity corridors. You see West 30, can't read that, West 38th Street to the north, North Lamar to the west, and Guadalupe to the east. This map shows the public transportation around the property. You see some around West 38th Street, Guadalupe, North Lamar, and some off of West 34th Street. That ends my presentation. I will stop sharing my screen. And Michael can start his presentation.
Super. Thanks a bunch. And sorry for the delay on getting here. Let me share my screen so I can pull up this presentation.
I got shared screen for you, Waylon.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That was nice. Thank you. Michael Gaudini, did you already introduce yourself, Michael? They know who you are.
Please also turn on your image.
Whose image? My image? I don't know that my bandwidth is going to do that. Here you go. Let me see here. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's a little slow. Hello. Is that good? You know who I am? Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
I hope you got a big picture of me. Okay, so thanks everybody. As I indicated, my name is Michael Whalen. I'm the representative for the applicant on 34th and on the 34th and West cases, and Michael Gaudini works with me at Armbrust and Brown. We're gonna be dealing with a lot of kind of in the weeds details here in a moment, and I just wanted to walk through what would be most helpful, I think, is talk about the process quickly, especially if we have anyone with us tonight who might not be familiar with the development process itself. I know some of you, obviously, former council member Tovo, Betsy Greenberg on the Zoning and Planning Commission, and many of you are very, very familiar. So as you can see here, there's three main types of reviews that often occur in the development process. We have first the neighborhood plan amendment, which sets the high level policies for a property. Then we have city staff, the planning commission, and city council all review the plan amendments before council takes action on a final vote for or against that amendment. And then, this is the case that where we are and that we're technically here to discuss is this plan amendment process right now. After the plan amendment, or simultaneously with the plan amendment, in this case, we have rezoning cases which set specific site regulations, like how someone can use a property and how tall they can build. These cases are often brought, as in the case today, in tandem with the plan amendments, and are also reviewed by staff, planning commission, and the council before council takes a final vote again for or against the item. We have filed related zoning cases, and I am going to cover those in this presentation, even though the focus is on the plan amendment tonight for the community meeting. Finally, as many of you know, there's the site plan process. The site plan is the technical review in which city staff confirms that a project complies with all of the rules and regulations that apply to the property. In this case, the owner is mainly trying to better align the property zoning with city goals and position it for the future. There are no, redevelopment plans right now, simply trying to position it so that it's got the right uses in particular. And go to the next slide. You've already seen where the property is. There are 4 different assemblages. You can only bring a zoning case on property that's contiguous, so it's more than one lot. But we've congregated the zoning cases into these 4 groups, and we'll see that in a little bit. Next, going to go through some images. The property is primarily used for older office and medical office. I know y'all are very familiar with it. Here's another one. These are street views. And then that's the one with the bridge over it. And then one last one, I think. Yeah, I know y'all are familiar with those. So the property is located within an area that generally features commercial, office, multifamily, and public zoning. All the areas that you see here in blue fit into one of those zoning categories: multifamily, commercial, office, or public zoning. As you can see, those zoning districts are generally oriented north-south around North Lamar and Guadalupe, and east-west around 34th Street and 38th Street, both of which help connect North Lamar and Guadalupe. So that's just kind of the context to set up where we're talking about in terms of zoning. Next, kind of at the high level, I wanted to look at the zoning on the properties so we could go through that. It's a bit complicated, and there are many overlapping regulations, but we've tried to summarize the current zoning in terms of allowable uses, base height, and bonus height. So this is the first one, track 1. This entire blue area is zoned, as you can see, LO, ETOD, DB, ETOD, MP. So ETOD zoning allows additional height, but it also features a base office zoning district. That's the LO. So in practice, what that means is that today, without rezoning, tract 1 could build residential and office uses up to 70 feet through the ETOD density bonus. And the city has tract 1 designated on its future land use map, or FLUME, for mixed use / office. So that's kind of tract 1. A portion of tract 2 is split. The portion you see here has ETOD zoning. That's again in the string that you see, CS, CO, ETOD, DB, ETOD. And that allows commercial, office, and residential uses up to 90 feet of the bonus height. And the city has this area designated for mixed use as well. The other half of that property allows residential and office uses up to 70 feet of bonus height and is designated for mixed use and office. This next tract is also has some split zoning in it. The portion here currently allows residential and office uses up to 70 feet of bonus height today and is designated on the future land use map for single family. The rest of tract 3 allows residential and office uses up to, let me see here, it looks like 100 feet of bonus height and is designated on the flume for mixed use, office, and single family. And by the way, this presentation, I know people are probably taking snips of it. It's going to be uploaded because we send it to Maureen and she'll upload it so that everybody has a copy. Tract 4 allows residential and office uses up to 100 feet of bonus height and is designated for mixed use / office. And again, I want to say this is just a survey of what the zoning already allows today without any changes at all. And we're going to go over the changes. I know it's a lot of information, but I really wanted you to know that the property allows a variety of heights with primarily residential and office uses and is mostly designated on the future land use map for mixed use or office, just like the one that you see here. So just to break this down into bite-sized chunks for a moment, first we'll focus on the plan amendment case, which is the simpler one, and that's the case that sets the high-level policy. If you remember a moment ago when I was describing how the city designated most of the property on the future land use map, it was mixed use / office, and there was a smaller portion for a single family that's related to the plan amendment case that we brought. So here we are requesting that the entire property be for mixed use. A small portion of the property on the western edge is already designated for mixed use. That you can see where it says no flume change requested. That's the part that's already designated for mixed use and thus does not need to be redesignated. So now I want to cover the rezoning and the related rezoning cases, which kind of set the site development regulations for the property. And we really have 4 main goals here in requesting this rezoning. First, we believe that approving this rezoning will better support the city's housing and transit goals. We believe it will do so by encouraging active ground floor commercial and providing more cohesive regulations and maximizing affordability options. And I'm going to cover each one of these individually. First, we'll start by providing a more cohesive regulations over this entire area. As you noticed earlier, the property currently features a patchwork of overlapping regulations that provides various different standards across the property. We are requesting a single unified comprehensive zoning designation, CSMUV DB90 ETOD DB ETOD-NP, which would allow for a range of commercial, office, and residential uses up to either 90 feet or 120 feet, depending on the location and the affordability level that someone utilizes. Also, as you'll remember from earlier, most of the commercial uses currently allowed on the property today are limited to office and residential uses, and you'll see some common uses here. If we go to the next slide, I think the next slide has the rezoning is going to allow for more active commercial uses that can both serve the community and better support the city's goals of having active ground floor uses. I want to pause for a moment, and also, I know many of you are aware of the ETOD, DB ETOD overlay prohibits lots and lots of auto-centric uses. So those auto-centric uses are already prohibited by the ETOD overlay. And our request helps maximize affordability options. The city currently operates a number of different affordability programs. These all have various quirks and differences, a few of which you can see here. These 3 programs have a sliding scale of height levels, affordability requirements, and ground floor commercial requirements. It can be hard to predict ahead of time which program will make the most sense at any given time. So we've requested the ability to participate in all three to make sure that the opportunity for a future project is feasible and also will have the affordability component. And then finally, even after the plan amendment and rezoning approval, any site development on this property is going to need to go through site plan review. Though, as noted at the beginning, the owner doesn't have plans immediately to redevelop it. The buildings are getting older, much older, and it's clear that something is going to need to happen and will happen soon. And then finally, when the future site plans come forward for development, not only will you get notice, neighborhood will get notice, and folks within 500 feet will get notice. The city will review each one of the developments and the site plans to ensure it complies with all of the city's development regulations, including the zoning regulations, utilities, environmental, transportation, and just to name a few. I would make two kind of final notes. First, site plans cannot cross right of way, which would mean that these 4 tracks would need to be developed under separate site plans, even though it might be part of a cohesive project. That's why we had to bring 4 separate zoning cases, because you can't have a zoning case that crosses the right of way. And I would also note that even though the owner doesn't currently have development plans, he has voluntarily funded a transportation analysis as part of these cases to help the city get a sense of the potential future transportation needs at this location. And I believe that's part of the zoning case and the zoning case backup. So just to recap, as you know, this property got rezoned to ETOD, Equitable Transit Oriented Development, as part of a city initiated effort, and everybody probably got notice of that who's on this call. Maybe not, but regardless, ETOD is an overlay that exists for this property. But due to a variety of overlapping regulations, the property also has features that where there's different height standards, and it also lacks many of the pedestrian-oriented commercial uses you would expect in the area. So our request would provide a cohesive zoning, will allow active commercial uses, will make the property eligible for a range of affordability programs. And I think that's all I've got. I know it was a lot, but I'm sure that you'll have questions that either Maureen or myself can answer.
Well, thank you, Michael. This is Mark Walters, the meeting facilitator. And before we jump into the answering the questions with the folks who have their hands up, John Good in the chat asked, could you please define what you mean by auto-centric? And by that, I assume you mean auto sales, auto repair, auto rental, and the...
Yes, that is correct. Those are the uses. There's a big long list in the ETOD, and we could, I guess we can't do chat. Oh yeah, we can't. Are we?
The chat is active.
Yeah, Gaudini could put the ordinance in the chat, the ETOD ordinance, but it has a...
Yeah, I'll put a link to it in the chat.
Yeah, it has a pretty long list of prohibited uses, and those are the types of uses. That is correct.
Okay, and folks with their hands up, the very first person is George Nelson. George, if you would unmute and ask your question or make your comment, please. Well, George gets to unmuting. We're going to go to the next person in the queue. That would be Jeff. Jeff, could you unmute and ask your question or make your comment, please?
Okay, thanks. And we really appreciate the presentation, Michael. And it gives us a little better sense of the status of your thoughts, the client's thoughts on the redevelopment. I just thought it was important, to let you know who the neighborhood is. And we are the people who live here. Heritage Neighborhood Association, we have strong historical ties to UT as a home of administrators, staff, and also athletes historically have lived in our neighborhood. We're also historically tied to a lot of LGBTQ community. And so we have that kind of historical background. We are a dense, walkable neighborhood with children, dogs, joggers, cyclists. We enjoy a mixed neighborhood filled with residents, renters, a meditation center, small business owners. We have families whose children attend Central Austin schools within walking distance from where we live. And we're eager to learn whatever specific plans you may have that are consistent with the zoning changes and how those plans promote our pedestrian-friendly, sustainable neighborhood character. And I know that we have many in our neighborhood who have questions, and we would like to go to Jenny Carlson first, if that's okay.
Well, I was going to go to George because he's had his hand up the longest, and then we can jump to Jenny if nobody objects.
Okay.
George, do you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I've been associated with the Heritage neighborhood since I was 2 years old, so I may be the oldest person on the block as far as longevity. One of the significant areas of concern, I think, for residents has been recreation. And I will remind the listeners that at one time, Ada Penn, who was the principal owner of much of the property in the Heritage neighborhood before she started selling off lots, one piece at a time, provided for a children's playground, which included a tennis court, basketball court. You could play tag football. You could play baseball if you could hit the ball over the big tree that's no longer there by the medical building. It was a home run. So I want to make sure that there is some consideration for recreation, playground, and that sort of thing. Hello?
Yes, thank you, George. Sorry, I unmuted, so you didn't want to listen to me sneeze. Michael, do you have a comment, a response to George's comment?
Yeah, I would just, at the time of site plan, there is a parkland dedication ordinance, which requires staff makes the determination whether to require parkland on site or a fee in lieu to be paid towards, it's called parkland dedication fee in lieu. That money goes to the city to be deployed. I believe it's been written so that it's deployed within the service area of the where the fee has been paid from. But we can definitely confirm that. Regardless, there's a fee. There's either parkland on site that is given or a fee in lieu that is paid and can be utilized for parks.
Thank you, Michael. Jenny Carlson, if you would unmute and ask your question. Then after that, we'll jump to Robin Abrams.
Thank you. I'm a resident of Heritage and a neighbor, and I live one street over from the proposed rezoning. I want to thank Jeff for going over our neighborhood's historical and continuing identity, and also Kathy has in the chat has added the context that we are also historic home to women's suffrage here in Austin. Generally, this neighborhood has been and remains a community for the now disappearing missing middle. We have staffers of UT Austin. We have young professionals who want to put down roots here. And while I understand the desire to put all of the properties in the same code structure, the same zoning overlay, I'm curious how the proposed, if there is no current vision aside from potential future uses, how exactly do the proposed zoning changes support our neighborhood's continuing identity as a home for the missing middle? That is to say, not just lots and lots of units, which I understand means people could live here, but how are these sustainable, affordable? How do these zoning changes support our continuing identity as a home for Austin's missing middle? Thank you.
Whatever that is.
This is Michael Whalen. So first, I haven't looked at TCAD yet, so I have no clue in terms of the value of the homes in the area. You all obviously would know better whether it still would qualify as something that people call missing middle. I do know here, utilizing the two additional overlays that we're seeking, vertical mixed use or DB90, both require a residential component, whereas the current zoning would not. So if we wanted to, if we kept the zoning as it is, you could still, you'd have an office, obviously, but you already have this DB-ETOD element, which also allows residential, but doesn't have the same flexibility in terms of the ground floor and the design, and does not offer the opportunity to have those ground floor commercial uses that are more walkable or pedestrian oriented, I think is the term most people refer to. But with vertical mixed use and DB90, both of those require two things that are important. They require residential, and they require on-site affordable housing, or on-site affordable units. So as you probably know, Jenny, over 50% of the people that live in Austin are renters, and providing housing that is affordable, I think, is one of the things that this project in particular would do.
Is there a reason why the DB-ETOD would be preferred to the DB-90? I hope I'm getting those distinctions correct, or one or the other. Why not choose one or the other then, in order to, is there one that would better fit our role as a place where people put down roots, or is there some reason beyond maximizing value for putting both of those codes on the rezoning request?
Sorry, I had to find the mic.
That's
So in particular, it's a little bit of the optionality. It allows, it's just difficult right now to predict what is going to work and what is not going to work. I think the market, as we've seen, especially with office, has collapsed. And although there's quite a bit of supply right now with housing, there haven't been very many housing starts since late 2023, very, very few in 2024. So we're going to see the housing supply pretty quickly get eaten up in the market, and prices, rents, unfortunately, are going to rise, is what I think people are predicting. But I think the ability to have a mix of active commercial where it makes sense is what we're trying to be sure exists here, so that ultimately the ground floor will have at least be designed to, if not have, that commercial component.
Thank you.
I'm Robin Abrams. I'm a resident of the neighborhood since about 1987. Own several properties in the neighborhood. So I've got a question that has three parts to it. If you want to maybe take some notes, or I'm happy to repeat it. The first question is, why are you applying to get rid of single-family zoning in a single-family neighborhood?
Do you want me to take them up one at a time?
Yeah, that might be the best way.
Yeah. So it's the future land use map is the plan has it as a single family, but the zoning doesn't match that plan currently, nor does the use match that plan currently. And we're in some ways just getting it to match what is currently there and to match what we're seeking, which is a commercial use with a meaningful residential component.
What sort of protections do you envision that the zoning changes will maintain, so that the zoning changes will maintain the character of this neighborhood, which was the intent of the neighborhood plan, and also provide walkability for all ages and abilities? I noted in your application letter that you consider West Avenue to be a through street, which it is not. And there is a big difference between 38th Street and 34th Street. 34th Street cuts through the middle of our single family neighborhood. And there is commercial on it, but we really want to know what, in a way, what you're asking for from us is kind of a blank check. We have there are no guarantees of anything. So we feel very uncomfortable supporting something where we don't know what kind of protections you have or what kind of consideration you might have for this historic neighborhood.
Well, the Michael Whalen again, for the record. The zoning has already established meaningful protections by prohibiting those autocentric uses that we talked about a few minutes ago. I know the ETOD ordinance has been posted to the chat, and I would really encourage folks to take a look at the prohibited uses there. Because I think that would be an example of one of the types of protections that have been built into what exists. The other type of protection is the requirement that the vertical mixed use, and the DB90 both have specific requirements that the ground floor be designed to house commercial uses. And in the case of I forget if it's in the case of the VMU, that requirement is for a use as well. Excuse me, it's the vertical mixed use has the design and use requirement. You have to put in a commercial use in a vertical mixed use building. You have to design the space in a DB90 building to support commercial uses. So that's another form of protection. Commercial users generate a higher rent. People will want to find a tenant who's a commercial tenant if one can make it there. And typically that ability to succeed as a commercial tenant, whether it be a small restaurant or a barber or a hair salon, that always depends on whether there's sufficient dwelling units nearby to support that use. So at least it's built in. So I think those would be two examples of the protections that are built in.
So the final question that I have for this question is, what types of uses do you envision for the ground floor properties of these buildings, and how do you personally anticipate the impact of having commercial might be on our neighborhood streets?
Well, Michael Whaling, and so that's one reason why we did a kind of a transportation analysis, a study, if you will, a transportation study. And again, that we can make that available if we have it available as well. I think the key here is this becomes an environment that is walkable. Somebody mentioned the walkability of the neighborhood, how people like to go out and walk. And I think that is exactly what these overlays promote. What they require is for you to create a ground floor that is pedestrian oriented in terms of the uses and examples of uses that right now, let me just pull, I think I've got this right. Let me look at this real quickly. That some of the uses that you can't do right now are like personal improvement services, like a gym, general retail sales, or food sales. So there's some basic uses that you can't do. You would also have to comply with subchapter E, which requires a clear area or a landscaped area, and then a sidewalk. It requires benches and trees. So there's a whole different set of standards that are applied to redevelopment that would, I think, make a big difference.
Thank you.
The next in line is Simon Atkinson, and then we'll go back to Jeff. Simon, if you would unmute, and I see you are, if you'd ask your question or make your comment, please.
Good evening, and thank you. I've lived for over 40 years within 500 feet of the sites. I also have an office and work within 500 feet of the sites. And I think we're all in Austin, and this includes the applicants, extremely concerned about climate change. Climate change is changing exponentially far faster than we anticipated. And so my questions are around sustainability and what protections that we can make. And it falls into 2 or 3 parts to this. The first is we found it very difficult to produce buildings 120 feet high that are economically sustainable. They generally have to be high-income buildings, and they're very difficult to deal with in terms of what is increasingly referred to as the heat sink effect. So in moving to the second part, we have, and when your clients, your owners last applied to us, we found that the hospital that they were wishing to build would have a tremendous heat sink impact on families and children in the area. So we're looking at how we can move with sustainable materials with low impact in terms of heat. The other part of this is the fact that there are some really old, beautiful live oaks through your sites. They're under duress at the moment because of the impact of you having a lot of car parking there. So really, what are you going to do in terms of a whole approach that is forward-looking, in tune with Austin, in tune with the fact that we're trying to be a green city, an affordable city, and what protections can you build into this that protect trees and the heat impact and the car impact that this might have?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mr. Atkinson. Michael Whalen again. I took some notes here because I think a lot of things have evolved in the city code. The requirements are matching your concern, frankly. And I'll give you a couple of examples, and offline, if you want to email me, I'm happy to send you all of these requirements from the environmental criteria manual. There's new landscaping requirements that have been beefed up. There's a whole new green building requirement that exists for buildings. There's and that's green building in terms of an example would be the stormwater detention and the water quality have to be biofiltration. And instead of, you see a bunch of cement stormwater detention facilities around town. These are now green and use biodetention instead. There's all water forward requirements have now been implemented, so that you'll see a lot of buildings now with purple pipe to use reuse water. And I think the other piece for me, oh, and also on trees, there is a requirement that any heritage trees, basically any tree larger than 19 inches, which is a protected tree, but any heritage tree greater than 24 inches has to be preserved on site. So I think there's lots of elements that have been promoted and passed, but I wanted to talk about, I think we can all agree, and I might be wrong, I'm sure somebody will disagree with me. I haven't gone a day without somebody disagreeing with me, that the single occupancy vehicle is probably our #1 source of pollution. And somebody I'm sure will disagree, but anyway, it is certainly a very, very big part of what has caused our climate change. And I find one thing that is extraordinary about this site is that there are 10 bus routes within 10 minutes of this site. It's an extraordinary fact. There's 2 Metro Rapids. There's one of only 5. There's an express route on the Metro Rapid. There's a crosstown route. There's 5 local routes. So, I mean, there are, there's also like a night owl as well, which is pretty rare. So this site, from a vehicle perspective, is pretty extraordinary. And I just think that I'm glad you brought that point up, because it reminded me that we need to emphasize this location as being unique from an environmental standpoint and car usage standpoint.
I think, Michael, if I find this a very constructive conversation, the way that you are approaching it. So let me come back in this conversation. Firstly, the trees. I think you make a really good point, but you know, and I know that when you're addressing mature, these are really incredible trees that you have. You've also got to be incredibly careful with the root bed, and you need specialists that can work with them. So I'm reassured in what you're saying with that. With the point where you think that people might disagree with you, absolutely the contrary. We have 2 major pollutants in society. One is the automobile, and some people think that we're going to find easy cures to it, but moving to transit is a key. The other is the amount of carbons that are emitted from buildings. So this issue that I'm finding it hard to understand, where it looks in your application and you emphasize this, 120 feet seems important to you. It's extremely difficult to get good buildings that are 120 feet that are anywhere near affordable and are green building technology. But also, of course, you've got the impact of these buildings, because they are preventing, if you look at the shadow effect that you could get from those buildings on adjacent buildings, it really could be quite harsh. Many cities now, and I'm just rounded up quickly, firstly, and we're one of them, are restricting parking. I think we'd like to know how much you are going to restrict parking in the scheme. And many are also creating very careful modeling of the heights of buildings, so they do not have an impact on adjacent single-family homes. Because a single-family home that is impacted by getting heat reflected off one of your buildings, or cannot get the sunlight, is not easily a home for children.
So first, you're correct about critical root zone. There are specific regulations about the root ball and the critical root zone that prevent at the time of site plan, when the trees are evaluated, there are rules and regulations about what can and cannot be done in the critical root zone of the tree. So I just wanted to make sure that I got that so that you could read about that when, you know, in the landscape in the
And you
environmental
intend
criteria.
to protect all the trees? Sorry to cut in on you, Michael.
No,
but
no, 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 no,
I think-
no, no. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to make sure that you, when you get
No,
the
we're on the
environmental
same
criteria
page.
manual, you take a look at that, and I'll be sure to get that to you if you'll
Thank you.
reach out to me. And then in terms of height, I agree based on my experience that as you go higher, the building becomes more complex and more difficult. I don't know what the heights ultimately will be, but I do hear what you're saying. I don't have a particular response, but I do hear what you're saying.
Thank you.
So the next person in queue would be Jeff. If you would unmute and ask your question or make your comment.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of level set a little bit. You know, we really appreciate this discussion. You may sense a little frustration from people in the neighborhood that this is sort of a hypothetical. There's no real concrete, you know, plan, you know, project that you're talking about. And we see our role as we're on the ground, we live here, we will be the ones most impacted by whatever comes of this. We are pleased to see it be redeveloped. It's, you know, most of those lots have been, you know, just vacant for a long time. And we just want to make sure it's developed in a way that's going to be, you know, create the neighborhood that's more livable. And also being on the ground here, we feel like these kind of interactions are good just to, you know, give you and the city some idea of, you know, what it's like on the ground here. And just a few things to keep in mind. Our neighborhood is part of the city's vision for bicycle route. And that route is going to be coming through 34th, at least for a bit. And so we are interested in the development, making sure that that bike route is going to be safe for all ages and abilities. Also, our neighborhood is near some of the schools, and so we are a feeder for some of these important central Austin schools. And we want to make sure that those schools will have, you know, still be able to be available for people in central Austin. And also, we have already experienced some of the new traffic congestion on 34th that stems from the new parking garage west of Lamar on 34th Street with the extension new development. And that congestion as people during shifts, it really causes a backup in both directions. That those heavy congestions are also virtually right across the street from a school where students or parents are dropping off their students. So anyway, that is, you know, those are some of our concerns and considerations and perspectives being on the ground. And we would hope that this would be considered in whatever site does develop. But if you have any sort of reaction to any of those, that would be appreciated.
I have a little bit of a follow-up just to make sure. Are you talking about the garage that's across from St. Andrews?
Yeah.
Okay. Just so I didn't know which one you were talking about, if there was one on the other side of 34th. And then you made a comment about that schools, I may have written this down correctly, would be harder would be harder to be available, would not be as available if more people, or I just didn't, I might have written it down.
Sure.
I apologize.
Oh, no, that's good. That's good. Yeah. As a single family neighborhood, as we've historically been, we do have families with lots of children, and there's a bus route that goes, the stop is right at our house, and I'm on 31st Street. But yeah, we want to make sure that there's families with children that can support some of the schools that are experiencing some contraction in enrollment. And we would hate to lose some of these really top caliber schools for lack of students. And so single family neighborhoods tend to be the primary contributor to enrollment for those. So we would like any sort of new development to be very family friendly, and cognizant that we're within walking distance to multiple schools.
Well, again, somebody asked the question, how do we know we're going to be protected? And I didn't get into the nitty gritty of all these rules and regs. I'm sure that Commissioner Greenberg would be able to do a better job than I would, but DB 90 and DB ETOD both have a pro rata bedroom mix requirement, which is means that whatever your mark, if you have, I'm making up numbers, 60, 70% one bedrooms and 20% two bedrooms and 10% three bedrooms, and that's just a made up number. Your affordable housing needs to reflect that pro rata mix as well. So there's, again, a built-in protection that exists for at least the affordable units to have that mix with the affordable units.
Yeah, and I would just add that the promises of affordability have been somewhat hollow. Many developers will just, pay whatever, fine or whatever to avoid having to provide something that is affordable. But anyway, I appreciate it.
Well, I would just, the only thing I'd correct on that is all of these affordable housing programs are reflected in restrictive covenants that run with the land for 40 years from the time of the certificate of occupancy. There is a whole team that audits the information that you have to obtain from tenants who are renting, their income level, to make sure that it corresponds with what the commitment is. And in my experience, your best enforcement mechanism ends up being the lenders and the banks, because they will not refinance or lend on a project unless the project is fully compliant with the restrictions set forth in not just the zoning regulations, but set forth in restrictive covenants related to affordable housing. I've personally been involved in that type of due diligence on property and know that that is something that's, on every checklist for a for any sort of equity participation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jolene Kabasa, if you would come off unmute and ask your question or make your comment.
Okay, thank you, Michael and Michael, for being here. And actually following up on Jeff's question, which I thought was a good one, is that it's about the elementary school. Briker Woods is a very popular school. It's hard to get into, and our neighborhood is in that catchment area. And for a while, we were known as kind of the cheapest neighborhood to live in order to be in that area. So I knew of at least two people who were renting here in order for their children to be here. But Michael, and so building on that, the leasing agent for the medical offices a few years ago, not those medical offices, but the ones on Lamar and 38th, pointed out that that location where your where your property owner wants to redevelop was a terrible location for medical offices. And it was because you had to go circumvent neighborhood streets, which are still there. They're still neighborhood streets. In fact, West Avenue is single family and multifamily is residential, and until it gets to your parcel, and then picks up being residential after that. And said that, yeah, so there was no demand for medical offices in a neighborhood where they had to navigate that. So I'm wondering if the same could be true if you're putting commercial in. And you yourself, Michael, point out that this project is important because of our affordability crisis. So why not make it all housing? And I mean, from that location, folks can walk to Briker Woods, they can walk to Seton, they can walk to UT, and adding commercial in that location doesn't make this neighborhood more walkable. We are walkable, we're small, we're narrow, and we have been looking for residential to kind of knit this neighborhood together. And I just can't imagine living on West Avenue myself, just a steady stream of cars going to the wine bar or whatever that's in that location. But I think it would be more valuable as housing. So do you have any? I mean,
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
It's a great question. I have two comments. One, I think your point about Briker Woods being a fabulous school is important, because I think it gives people who can't afford to live in the neighborhood as an owner an opportunity to have that benefit. As you just acknowledged, some people have rented in the neighborhood to do that. This will give people actually a foothold with some affordability and affordable units in the neighborhood. So that's a great point, and I appreciate you raising that. The other one, and I wish it were not this case, Jolene, but the ETOD, currently the ETOD overlay that's been slapped on this area requires commercial. So right now with the current zoning, it requires commercial. The only way you would not require commercial, I believe, and I will double check this for you, Jolene, is if you had like a multifamily based zoning district. But I bet you Betsy or Kathy could answer that question. But I will get that answer for you. But I believe right now, as it stands, the ETOD requires with the current zoning, the ETOD requires commercial.
I think that's unfortunate, because I just don't see it being successful, and especially if they have to, because they'll fall into the same problem that those commercial that the medical offices had. And also, I was wondering, since the market is so
Jolene, can I interrupt? Can I interrupt
Yep.
for a moment? And I apologize for doing so.
Go ahead.
The currently as I indicated, the DB, the vertical mixed use, you have to design and use that ground floor. As you know, the city has, and this is only an interpretation, they can always go back, does allow live work on the ground floor if you aren't able to find a commercial user for that space initially. And the DB90 allows you to design the ground floor for commercial, but you don't have to have a commercial user in there. I think the interesting piece of all this is the DB ETOD, which is already there, is much stricter. It requires design and use of that ground floor with commercial uses, some of the ones that I showed earlier in that slide presentation. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt. It's an unusual puzzle having just the ETOD overlay without the vertical mixed use of the DB90, which provides the type of flexibility you've just described.
Okay, well then I'll just follow up then. Why now? Because everything is in flux. The market's in flux. It's possible that we're going to have building supplies being in flux and maybe not even attainable. So why, and who knows, and city council could change zoning code again. I mean, they've been doing a good job of it. So why not wait when you have a real proposal and there's more surety in what's happening?
Well, I think the owner and the person who's owned it for years, Adrian Overstreet, has he's been there for years. It is at a point where he thinks he would like to begin that redevelopment and knows that there'll be a better opportunity to get a quality person to help him do so if the options that I've outlined exist for the property.
Okay.
Hey, this is Mark again. I'm going to make a time check. It's a really great conversation. We have 19 minutes left in the meeting, and there's 4 people with their hands up and a few questions in the chat. So let's go to John Good. If you could unmute and ask your question. John? Well, John is working on muting. We go next person. Their hands up. Mary Lynn Garrett.
Hi there. I know you don't have a plan in place, so my question might not be as valid, but are there measures with what you're looking at that will minimize the need for a massive parking infrastructure?
That's interesting. People don't,
parking's
really expensive to build. And it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's a very fair question, but often you might be a neighborhood that welcomes people parking on the street, but most neighborhoods that I've had experience with want there to be some amount of sufficient parking on site to accommodate the residents and any commercial uses that might exist on the ground floor and any visitors that might go to the building. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. Somebody on this call mentioned, parking earlier, and the city council has removed parking requirements for any use. You have to have ADA spaces. That's federally mandated, but there's no parking minimum requirement anymore. But I'm still finding that people in the community are expecting sufficient parking for the use on the site. And I don't know whether that's been your experience or what the expectation might be, Mary.
Well, it would depend on the project, but because we don't know the project scope, well, we'll have to wait. But I wondered if you had anything put in place. Thank you.
No. But I do want to emphasize that's in part why the site is attractive, because of the 10 bus routes within 10 minutes. It's a pretty extraordinary site in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
And John Good couldn't unmute, but he did drop his question in the chat. His question is, are hotels and hospitals allowed with these changes that are being requested?
I know medical office. One second. Let me look at the list.
They are.
Yeah, hotel is, yes. But one second. Is hospital as well? I know the medical office under 5,000 is.
I think the limited.
The limited. Hospital limited is? Yeah.
So the next person with their hand up is Robin Abrams. If you would unmute and ask your question or make your comment.
Thank you. Michael, thank you so much. You've been giving us a lot of helpful answers. My neighbors have communicated what our concerns are and the rationale behind the existing neighborhood plan. as an inner city neighborhood, we are constantly under pressure for redevelopment. So if we're not fighting developers, we're fighting property tax raises because of the development potential. We're very, as you know, because I know you know several of the neighbors, we're very educated about the planning process. We are also very organized. We can be obstructionist or we can be supportive. 120-foot buildings will change the skyline of our neighborhood forever and will overshadow our 32-foot buildings. We will be lying in bed in our homes and seeing this building. So we will be expecting recognition of our concerns and elements from the applicant, as opposed to an application that's just trying to max out the site. And I hope that you will communicate that to your client. We'll be looking for an indication that the applicant is invested in strengthening the character of our neighborhood. And so we're asking, and I know you cannot answer this question, but we want to know what commitments your client will make to work with us to make plans that we can live with.
Well, two things. One, only because I didn't want it to escape, and I know it's being recorded, but somebody had asked about hospital, I think, John Good. I'm going to answer your question, Robin. Give me just 30 seconds. In addition to hotel, hospital limited is, I think, allowed, but hospital limited is also allowed today in the LO as a conditional use, just as for your information. And so, Robin, in connection with your question, the site, I went through, you'll have a copy of the presentation. The site has various height maximums under the density bonus that has already been provided, and I think looking at those is a helpful thing to do, and one that I certainly would encourage the owner to do. And I don't know who among the group would be the best person to reach out to communicate, whether that's you, Robin, or but if you want to let me know who that is, that'd be great. And I'm happy to reach out and continue that particular discussion. Absolutely.
Thank you. We'll be sure that you get a message to what would be the best way to communicate. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. The next person up is Betsy Greenberg, and time check. We have 12 minutes left. So Betsy, you've already unmuted to ask your question or make your comment.
I was wondering whether you would commit to on-site affordable units instead of fee in lieu. John Good also suggested that we could avoid the fee in lieu for parkland dedication. And would you prohibit short-term rentals? In general, are there uses you'd be willing to prohibit? I know you can't necessarily answer this question off without discussion, but that prohibiting certain uses probably would make this more palatable, particularly those ones that begin with the letter H. So I guess that's just a comment, because I don't think you're in a position today to commit to prohibiting. Maybe you are. If you are, we'll be certainly willing to listen.
No, it's nice to hear your voice, Betsy. I was afraid I had gotten that I was going to be your last case at ZAP. So it's good to hear from you. Absolutely. I think I demonstrated that. I have demonstrated that willingness in the very case that you saw, I guess 2 weeks ago.
Okay, all commercial uses.
Well,
just like in D10.
Yeah, nice try. That's not the purpose of this, but going through the list, I think is a fair request. And these other requests, some of them we don't have any
plans.
We don't have any flexibility. For example, you have to have on-site affordable housing for rentals. If it's a rental,
but you could do condos and then it's all fee in lieu.
No, I hear you and I understand, and that might involve a further discussion. The STR, happy to talk about that, and happy to talk about all these issues. I think they're all common issues, and I know this doesn't surprise you, that have been brought up with other other neighborhoods that I've had the pleasure of, working with. It is a pleasure. I mean, this is very, very helpful information. So I certainly appreciate everybody, saying something, contributing. I've taken lots of notes. It's been very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you.
So the next person with their hand up is Kathy Tova. If you would unmute and ask your question or make your comment, please.
Yeah, hi all. This is going to be duplicative of a couple of the comments that were just made, but I regard it as, I agree with my neighbors who regard it as a really high priority to try to have some parkland on site, because this is a neighborhood that really has very limited access, no access within our neighborhood to parkland. And I think adding lots of new families in that area, they need access in the neighborhood to open to recreational space. And on that note, I would also like to talk about, I don't think this question has been asked. I've had to do some other things around here and may have missed this, but I did want to ask about the bedroom mix. I don't think that has come up before, but can you talk a little bit about, and I understand there's no project, but I would like to see a commitment, not just to on-site affordable housing, which I know has been brought up for rental as well as for sale, but also to have some kind of commitment to a bedroom count for the housing that is conducive to families. So, a priority on 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms versus just projects that are going to be efficiencies in 1 bedrooms. And again, I understand you don't have a project, but this is the time to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
From our perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did mention it earlier. You may not have heard, but it's the pro rata bedroom requirement the pro rata bedroom, which formerly you used to have as a restrictive covenant, is now required in DB ETOD and DB 90. So that is a requirement. I expect it'll be added to VMU as well. So with regard to the bedroom mix, the pro rata requirement is there, regardless.
Michael, is that just, it just needs to be are you talking about the affordable housing bedroom count needs to be reflective of the overall market unit?
Yes.
And I guess what I'm saying is I want to see a project where the market units are multi-bedroom. I think some of my neighbors talked earlier about breaker woods and, we're supporting our neighborhood schools, and we do that by making sure that that the housing coming online is in all efficiencies in 1 bedroom. So, the pro rata is helpful, and I'm glad it's in there now and doesn't need to be argued for each time. But I also think the housing that comes onto these sites should be multi-bedroom. I think that would be supportive of some of the other goals that the city has set in terms of, encouraging more families with children and, diverse family and household types to stay in the central city. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
The next person, again, we have time check. We have 6 minutes left. So I think really the last 2 folks we're probably able to get to is Simon Atkinson, followed by Javier Salinas. So Simon, if you would ask your question, or make your comment.
To continue, Michael, the very positive notes that we're getting, we would love to invite your clients to the site to know the neighborhood. And we wonder if you would communicate to them that we would love to socialize with them and meet them.
Absolutely. I'll pass that along.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. So Javier, if you would unmute and ask your question or make your comment, please.
Appreciate the time. I just wanted to ask, I know, I believe it was Michael had mentioned that the owner of the site, wants to change and wants to go in a different direction than currently what it's at. Is there a time frame? And I apologize if this was addressed. Is there a time frame for when, this project may be solidified? Is it 5 years, 10 years? Is it 1 year? Kind of down the road.
Fair question. So Michael Whalen again. Well, we know from, and there's others on this call that know better than I do, that from right now, nothing is going to happen for 3 years, because we've got zoning, we've got site plan process, you've got building permit. After that, we didn't even include building permit. So site plans alone now are taking 12 or longer months to get. And then after that, a building permit, which usually does take about 6 months. So we've got time, but part of the challenge, of course, is you've got to start at some point, so that the vision and the policies that you're articulating and that our city council has articulated are both considered when making the decision about what the entitlements are that you can build from. And I think that's the process we're going through now. But there certainly wouldn't be any sort of redevelopment imminently, right? I mean, because just practically speaking, you've got years before you could get your building permit, and then you've got the construction, right? So I mean, you're talking about a years from now.
And there's one question in the chat that's nobody kind of touched to or got to topic adjacent. It has to do with a permit to remove heritage trees. Is that a process with the city? I don't know. I don't do that as part of my job.
Yeah, there is a process to remove heritage trees. If a tree is there's different standards, but it is a public process, and you requires, I believe, a variance. But I don't want 1 second.
Okay.
I'm going to.
But suffice it to say, there is a process.
There's a process. I'm just forgetting now. There are times when any tree, whether it's protected, heritage, or smaller, is a danger. I don't believe that's the case. I mean, I'm not an arborist, so I don't want to say what is and is not the case at this site. But if there's a dangerous tree, it can be removed or be required to be removed if it's causing a danger. I can't speak to the condition of the trees. We will have to do a tree survey at the time of site plan to identify the specific trees that are there. And often with the heritage trees, developer will also assess their health.
It looks like we're going to run a tad over, and we want to be respectful of everybody's time. This has been a very productive conversation. So 2 things. First, Maureen, can you put up your contact information on the screen? So if anybody needs to contact you or the case manager, they'll have that readily available. And Javier, if you would unmute and ask your question while Maureen's doing that.
Yeah. Actually, before we do that question, I just saw Jeff, but no last name. And you said you're also willing to help further discussion, but there's no last name.
It's Jeff Webster, and I'm sort of leading the neighborhood effort on this for the time being.
Okay, my contact info is on the cover letter. If you don't mind shooting me an email, copying copying Laura. You indicated here that Laura Grimm is the president. That'd be great.
Okay, will do.
Super duper. Thanks.
So Javier, it's your turn. I think this is going to be the last question. Then we're going to go in to next steps, and then we'll convene the meeting or end the meeting.
So this is actually Tracy Smith. It was a kind of a secondary question to Javier's question. And being brand new to this neighborhood, just a month or so, 2 months or so, my concern of learning about all of this after the fact is with the addition of the rail plus the potential for the added commercial in this particular area, I'm worried about the impact on traffic in the area, whether that's going to remain, a concern for the community, or if that's going to somehow be mitigated. And I apologize again, I was late to this meeting, so if that's been addressed.
I'm assuming that was directed at me because
Yes, just to whoever.
I represent the applicant. Or did you want the staff to answer that? I don't want to.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. That's just my growing concern is that between the two of those am I here on 35th Street being in the middle going to be affected, in an adverse way?
But you said there's a TIA already.
Well, not a TIA, a study that was done. We were not a study, and that study should be in the staff backup. But I'm happy, to get that to you all. I think Jeff indicated he'd email me, and I'll get with the transportation engineers and get the copy that we submitted to the staff, and happy for y'all to then circulate that. So I guess, Tracy, so long as Jeff and Laura Grimm have your contact info, if you want to reach out to me separately, Tracy, I'm happy to send you that as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And this was something that was voluntarily done. It wasn't required. And the other thing I'd add in terms of what happens is at the time of site plan, the staff's going to identify measures that might need to be taken in connection with traffic and trips, and identify possible mitigation. There is something called a SIF, a street impact fee, that will have to be paid. And that street impact fee, that money is then deployed in the area for those improvements that might have been identified.
Well, thank you, everybody. Maureen, I hope we got to everyone's question. Though I want to make sure the person on the phone call that ends on the phone, it ends in 1124, has had a chance to ask a question, because it's kind of hard to raise their hand on a phone. Or is that Kathy Tovo?
I don't think it's me. I'm sorry, Mark. Who did you say? What did you say it ends in?
1124.
No, that's not me, but thank you for asking.
Okay. Yes, so it's that person who ends in 1124. If you hit *6, if you have a question or like to make a comment. If not, I'll assume that you don't, and we'll move on to the next steps in this process. And if you come off mute while we're going through the next steps, we'll follow up with you after that's over. So Maureen, do you want to go over next steps?
Yes, so the next steps will be I will meet with the long-range planning team. I'll report back to them the questions and concerns and comments from the meeting. We'll look at the neighborhood plan, look at the comp plan, and we will make a recommendation on the request to change the future land use map. We will forward that recommendation on to Jonathan Tomko, and he will bring it to the planning team. And then they will make a recommendation. Once we have finalized our staff recommendation, we'll start looking at planning commission dates. I'll reach out to the planning contact team, let them know what date we're looking at, and when the deadline would be to get the letter of recommendation to be included in the staff case reports. We have not picked out a date yet because we haven't finalized the staff recommendation. If y'all want to periodically check in on me to see if we're getting closer to a date, feel free to do that.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. They'll be receiving both planning commission and city council notices if they live within 500 feet, own property within 500 feet, or a representative of an organization whose boundaries falls within that 500-foot boundary. So, Michael, do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up this evening's meeting?
No, I just am so appreciative of the commitment of the neighborhood, the feedback, the information, and obviously we'll be in touch again. So thank you very much.
With that, we'll end our meeting and everyone can get back to their regularly scheduled lives. So thank you very much for taking some time to find out about this case. Have a good evening.